It is the time for Halloween, a time when the creatures of the dead rise up, a time when spirits linger amongst the living among us, and of course that big, creepy monster stalks you. It stalks from the shadows, it stalks you from under your bed, it stalks you when you least expect it. Horrifying, ginormous, and worst of all, deadly. Yeah, I'm not sure where this sort of matches with Halloween. This is the only thing I can get as close to as a costume for Halloween with my budget. Well, we did it. Another year of Billyween, and it was moderately more successful than the last one, to say the least. My channel is nearing 500 subscribers, and I've been doing this YouTube channel for nearly 4 years. Honestly, no regrets. And of course, if you are also familiar with my channel, you know I'm a big horror enthusiast, whether it be with Resident Evil, dinosaur horror games, or just anything to do with horror. I just love horror, and that's why Halloween's one of my favourite months and why I dedicated a special event for it. It's also the month of my birthday, so it makes it even more special for me. So yeah, that's why I've started this Billyween thing, and thank you all those who tuned in, including the 20 people that watched my dinosaur video. It's a shame me playing those shitty dinosaur games amounting to nothing. So what's the big video I wanted to talk about today? It's because the year before I did a ranking of all my favourite horror Let's Plays I've done for the channel, and last year I did ranking all Resident Evil remakes from the second and third ones monsters. Well, because it's also the month of my birthday, I was feeling a bit nostalgic this year. I wanted to go back and play some games I used to play a lot as a kid. And if you've seen my live streams, I've played Jak and Daxter 2, the King Kong video game, and the SpongeBob SquarePants movie video game. Not sure that video game really matches this year's theme. But I also did a little Let's Play on a game called Ao Oni. Ao Oni? Oni. Blue Demon. I'm just calling it Blue Demon. Put the name on screen. If you're an old YouTube veteran like me, you see this title and the first thing you think of is that RPG Maker horror game that all those YouTubers were playing so many years ago. In fact, many YouTubers we're probably still watching now started their career mostly playing this game. In fact, RPG makers were sort of like the big thing back then. The Crooked Man, Misao, and Mad Father all were inspired by this one game, Ao Oni. To my surprise though, when I was looking into the files for this game this year, I was really surprised to notice that it kind of is a small franchise. What being my small franchises, unlike the behemoths that are like Marvel, DC, Call of Duty, Resident Evil, the list goes on, Ao Oni kind of spawned somewhat of a mini franchise with its brand. It has comic books, mangas, it even has a sort of spoof chibi anime. This franchise is weird. And of course, though being a miniature franchise, there was obviously going to be the inevitable movie tie-ins, and there was 3. There was an anime one which I haven't watched, but I've seen the animation online. No comment. But of course, the one we're talking about today is the very first one from 2014. Ao Oni has a really dedicated fan base and people who love the first game, even to the point people have gone ahead to remake it, rewrite it, make fan fiction, make all sorts of fan games for it. So, how was the reception for this film from the fans? About as well as a live action movie can go when it comes to adaptations. It is crazy though to think many years later, we're starting to get these really great video game movie adaptations, and even just anything being put into live action that's mostly had this anime aesthetic is starting to get popular with the One Piece Netflix, The Sonic movies, both of which have been not only highly acclaimed by fans, but have really demolished the box office. Only for the Mario film to come in and even destroy the box office even more, to now Five Nights at Freddy's potentially going to surpass the Mario movie. So when this film was coming out though, people were kind of unsure about adaptations of video games. One thing you had to kind of give credit though, you don't really see many indie developed games get a movie adaptation. Sure, games like Resident Evil would get loads of movies, but they're a big franchise owned by Capcom. Amnesia is kind of more in the style when it comes to indie horror games, or even games like Outlast. However, while those games you would think would make amazing movies, they've never been touched, but Ioni's had 3 movies. You kind of have to give props to that, like, especially now since RPG Maker games are kind of a thing of the past. Like, there's very few developers I know that touched the RPG Maker engine. But of course, I decided to watch this film after I was very curious and wanted to get back into my nostalgia for the franchise, so how well was it? This is what I'm choosing to end Billyween on. The movie starts off with our main character Anna, who has run away, who we can only assume is the purple demon of the main antagonist of the game. Anna goes to hide in a room and the creature seems to be mimicking the voice of what assumes to be her brother. But before we can focus on that turns out that was a flash forward to what's gonna happen. Right now we are just on the streets with a boy listening to a musician. People take music very seriously over there in Japan. Cut to another flash forward, we see Anna hanging out with her friend Shun, and he is showing off the video game Oni to her. I won't lie, there was something kinda nice seeing him show off the game that Oni was first created on. It's a nice little Easter egg. They seem to be setting up a romantic story with these two, and I gotta be honest, I'm not a fan of these two characters. I do want to say, these actors aren't given a really mediocre performance. The acting is actually really well done for this movie. The only problem is though, Anna and Shun aren't really that relatable or interesting to really care enough about them. Given how short the film is, only ranging in like an hour and 10 minutes, that's excluding the opening title and end credits. We don't really get enough time to explore their friendship as much, or even their romantic chemistries they were trying to set up. It actually just kind of felt as though they just wanted to set up some foreshadowing for the ending of the film, which, don't worry, we'll be crossing that threshold when we get there. Shun is eventually confronted by Takaro, which, if you're familiar with the first game, you'll recognise him as one of the 4 children trapped in the house in the first game. Design-wise, they're very different. In fact, even personality-wise are very different. The 4 characters that these kids are meant to be based on from the game not only are drastically different from their game counterpart, even personality-wise they're kind of assholes. The only one you could kind of say got a bit of a personality boost was Hiroshi. Hiroshi was just that nameless protagonist which you would take control of to solve puzzles and escape the monsters. He didn't really have a personality, so in the movie they kind of tried to make him a bit more of a heroic character, but he comes off as bland. Takaro is kind of an arsehole, which Takaro wasn't an arsehole in the first game, he was just more so the more braver of the 4 kids, and he was always there to try and help escape whenever he could. Of course, there wasn't really much personality of him in the game, so there wasn't really much to really critique. The other 2 characters that got drastically changed, Mikia and Takashi, and yeah, even they were just kind of dimmed to just arseholes. In the game, Takashi was just cowardly and scared, and you kind of felt bad when he got pushed to suicide in that. Mikia was an idiot. She chose to stay in a room by herself and inevitably got unalived. Eventually, Shun and Takaro eventually arrive at the house, moving a strange container. Again, weird foreshadowing. Eventually, all the cars go into the house, and big shock, the door locks behind them, just similar to the games. All the characters' phones also stopped working, so they can't call for outside help. And okay, I'll admit, I'm a bit of a sucker for video game Easter eggs like that, so, you know, kudos to you, film. Takashi and Shun eventually get left in a room all by themselves, and then oh my goodness, these effects. We'll get around to them when the creature fully shows itself. Shun and Takashi get spooked by it and eventually try and figure out what the noise was for Shun to knock over a flower and Takashi runs away. Shun and Anna reunite and Anna seems very weirdly stiff. She mentions she wants to investigate something that happened in this house, but she's very obscure about it. In fact, the main setup for this film not only drags on too much, it just generally feels as though they're trying too hard to not reveal what's going on for the twist, and the twist is not that great. Eventually, Mika gets spooked by something she saw in the window and eventually runs into Takashi hiding in the closet. Again, a nice little callback to the game. I do appreciate the little Easter eggs that this film has, like it's not a half-assed film. Though, speaking of the games, Takashi cowering in the closet, Mika and Hiroshi find him and then just leave him with Mika just making a very hurtful comments, calling him a coward and just leaving him. Again, this is the kind of thing I don't quite understand with character changes in movies. I don't know, maybe they just wanted to go the route of just making that really annoying female character of the group just so you could hate her and wait for her to get her comeuppance. The problem with that though is with the short time this movie is around, we don't really have a chance to really hate Mika that much. Like even in the first game, she wasn't hateable, she was just so cowardly and stupid. But you did kind of feel sorry for her when she got killed because she was just another victim in what is a cruel game. Hiroshi tells Takashi to wait in the closet and eventually tells him they'll send help when they escape. Sadly, the closets aren't as effective in this movie as they are in the games. Mika eventually steals the keys of Takara and tries to make her run for it as well, but she eventually bites the dust as well when she makes too much noise and the monster finds her. And I think now it's time we talk about this thing. Now, on one hand, trying to turn this scary was going to be a challenge already. But as weird it is to say, they actually kind of look less scary now in live action. Look, don't get me wrong, RPG Maker doesn't really have the scariest graphics, but there was that unsettling vibe when they started chasing you. They were very calm, they were very slow, but they showed determination into catching you. There was also that shot in the prison cell when you're behind the bars, and while it's still capturing that whole like calm demeanor, eventually it would grip the cage and start shaking it, only to frustratingly walk away. They would also show clever ways on trying to ambush the player when they least expected it. Bursting out the floor, hiding in the fireplaces to stalk you, or even just trying to corner you so that you couldn't escape. This one though, they kind of went the generic giant monster route, and I will say, the tiny body and a giant head just looks way too goofy for me. And hell, that smile they do, it was kind of hard to be spooked by these things. Eventually Shun discovers that they're in his video game. Sure. Why are they in his video game? How did they get in his video game? Magic. They find a piano room, they need to clean the keyboards to get a code to answer the next puzzle of the game to escape, and that's when they get confronted by the Ao Oni again, mimicking Mikia. Of course, Anna is not tricked by his and tells Shun not to open the door. It seems like these creatures aren't as physically strong, so they have to rely on tricking people into open the doors for them so that they can kill you. I got to admit, pretty good tactic. I actually kind of like the fact they mimicked voices to try and trick people. It's a neat change, but also a clever reference to how they worked in the previous game. Eventually though, the monster that is mimicking Mikia just decides to break down the door. Okay, if these creatures can just break down the doors at any point, why did they even bother trying to trick the kids into opening the door? Also, I'd be a criminal if I didn't make this joke with the monster peeking his head through the doorway.
Here's Johnny!
And then Shun make a run for it, and the demon just slowly just chases after them. In fact, there's a moment when she's trying to open this lock to get the next puzzle, and the Oni's literally right there, staring at them, yet doesn't really begin chase until they've got the thing unlocked. It was rather odd. It's really hard to tell what the motivation behind this monster is. Now, in the game, they acted as mindless monsters. They were stalking the player and ambushing them when they could. The movie, though, they do display some sort of intelligence with the ability to mimic the voices of the cast. But then it does like these dumb moments where you feel as though they should have been able to chase after the character, but then they chose not to. Eventually, Shun asks Anna how did she know that the monster was imitating Mika, to which she goes over the story about her brother. saying how Shun and him resemble each other a lot. I feel as though this movie's really struggling to make the monster threatening, it's also really struggling to choose the right moment when the characters should have talks. Eventually teaming up with Hiroshi again, they try and find Takaru to try and get the keys to escape, only for Takaru to knock out Hiroshi. It is later revealed that it turns out Shun's been dead this whole time. Yeah. I will admit, I didn't see that coming. It was such a weird twist though. In fact, I just didn't quite understand it, because in previous shots, the characters never acknowledged him until they got into the house. And it would explain Takashi's freak out, but it's kind of like confusing, because wasn't he standing there before when Takashi was scared? There was even a moment he looked back, clearly indicating he heard a name. So why did he only start freaking out once he saw him? It's not like with The Sixth Sense, where there was a lot of build up to why the kid was afraid of all these people and ghosts. But there was a clear setup for Bruce Willis's character being a ghost by all the character interactions he had. They did a clever way to make it seem like he's there with other people interacting with them, but also a really good twist when it finds out he's a ghost. It feels like the movie was trying to replicate that, but because we didn't get enough time to know these characters, see Takaru interact with more of the cast, we didn't really get enough of a satisfying twist, or did we really care that much when he discovered his body. Eventually Takaru is planning on killing Anna just so she doesn't reveal to the police or anyone of his wrongdoings, until he's greeted with a face full of karma. Anna grabbing Hiroshi make a run for it, only for Hiroshi to be left behind. And I won't lie, the way he dies is just way too goofy for me. And we're finally back to the chase sequence that was in the opening. Oh my goodness, who asked for a butt shot of the blue demon? Jesus Christ, I wonder where your only mate would rate this booty on the booty tier list. Eventually the creature tries to imitate Anna's brother in ways to trick her into opening the door so that he can kill her. Must have hurt his hand the last time he smashed the door open. Which then leads to a very, very confusing ending. So she asked the creature, which is meant to be imitating, I'm assuming, her brother, into saying, why did he always tell her he was okay? For her to then run to the door, open it, and then Shun is there to grab her and they walk into the light together. Which cuts to Anna and Shun just chilling where the film originally started off as, and that's it. I'm bloody confused by that ending. People online have speculated what this could have been. Could this whole time Anna was just trapped in limbo? Was she trying to pass on to the afterlife? Were her and her friends killed in this warehouse and no one knows who did it, and then they were always trapped and then eventually she passed on to the afterlife with Shun? Is she always in a loop where she would always go back to the house where she was killed every time? Why were they in the video game world in the first place that Shun created? Maybe this was answered in the second film, but as far as the first film goes, I'm sorry people, this film is terrible. Again, I do want to emphasize, the people behind the movie clearly are putting their effort into it. And while the blue demon effects themselves aren't amazing, for Japan special effects, they actually do look pretty good. It's just that the design of the monster just comes off as way too goofy, and honestly it was hard to be scared by this creature. The other problem was as well, I just found it hard to really care for the cast of this movie. When they would be killed, why should I care? I didn't get to know them long enough to really develop a relationship with them. Sure, we always have those films where we're just waiting for these people to be picked off one by the monster. But in many films like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, or even the classic Alien film, you got to know the cast and you got to like them or hate them based on what they did. So whenever they did get their comeuppance, it was a satisfying conclusion as well as a tragic end to a character we might have liked. This film though, I didn't care for any of the cast. One's a bully, one's an arsehole, one's a coward, one is interested in butterflies, and the other two just exist. The monster's personality as well was not interesting enough to really be intimidated by it. I've said in the past, the monster's personality also needs to be interesting and creepy enough for the viewers to be horrified of it. Let's take for instance the Stalker from Amnesia the Bunker. We get an idea of its personality because it's like a hunter, but it also has that stalking vibe. It's always hunting for the main character, it's always smashing things when it gets frustrated. Every time it hears a noise, there's this like adrenaline, it dashes after where it heard the noise. This monster, I didn't quite understand its motivation. Again, going back to the first game, there was no clear motivation behind the monsters either. They were kind of just that monster that just stalk after you. There was signs that they were smarter than they let on by destroying areas that they were trying to escape from, ambushing the player when they would least expect it. In this movie though, the monster's inconsistent. It tries to use the voices of the characters to lure people to open the door for them, yet it also shows it can smash and open doors without the need of the person to open it. Overall though, the film's a mess. It's a shame because the concept of the game could be done really well. Trapped in a building, having to solve puzzles to escape, being stalked by an unstoppable monster. These concepts have been done in the past, so it's kind of a shame despite what this movie's meant to be based on, they just couldn't grasp the basics of what made the game creepy. Look, Ao Oni's not a horror masterpiece, but the people behind it knew how to make a creepy environment. There was a lot of silence, you could hear like the decay of the house, you could hear the monsters stalking in the background. When you don't even have that, you're just kind of left with a very dry, bitter movie. And so, that's my review of Ao Oni. It's a mess. But I don't think it's the worst movie I've ever seen. Okay, yes, the characters and the monsters and the horror factor weren't great. If I never played the game though, I would say this film is just passable. And trust me, we've had way worse video game adaptation movies than this one. I will say, despite its lackluster appeal though, the fact that the people behind the game were able to generate this much hype for this film and to spawn this little small franchise is commendable. I think that's the real positive I can say about this, despite the fact the film's not great. The fact this small game, which to today now people probably don't even remember it aside my generation, it has spawned a really dedicated fan base and it managed to spawn this movie. They got enough people interested to make 2 more after this, and from what I've heard, the next 2 films were much better, albeit the animated one, looking again at it. There could always be a 4th one, that's all I'm saying. And so wraps up Billyween. And on to our future content, or who knows what is in store for us. Overall, a lot has happened for me this year. I've moved to a new place, I've sorted out my room, and I'm still carrying on with my content. And I could not be happier with what I'm doing. Who knows what the future holds for me, and honestly, I'm looking forward to what next project I plan to work for next Billyween. Could it be another crappy horror review? Or could it be something I'm really passionate about? With all that said and done, thank you all so much for watching, and what did you think about this movie? Have you seen it? What do you think of the other films that came after it? And have you played the original game? All that said and done, thank you all so much for watching, and if you want to see more content like this in the future, stick around. Farewell everybody.